Hi everyone, I'm Heath Hightower, co-host of Process Recordings. Before we get started with today's show, I want to just give you a quick reminder. While Lisa and I hope you find our show useful, we also want you to know that it's not a substitute for therapy. If you do need a therapist, however, we do recommend that you check out the psychologytoday.com website. Also, if you need immediate support, contact 988, which is the 3-digit number to contact the National Crisis Hotline and Suicide number. Thanks for listening and watching, and enjoy the show. Hi everybody, I'm Heath Hightower.
And I'm Lisa Wessan.
And this is Process Recordings, the show where we have real conversations about real human experiences, and we offer tools, tips, and techniques to help people solve some of life's greatest challenges. Welcome back, Lisa.
Yes, Heath, it's great to be here.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, life gets lifey, and we have to have tools and techniques and tips methods to cope when we get those plot twists. And today we're talking about the plot twists involving boundaries.
That's right.
And in the first episode, we discussed what are boundaries, and we kind of tried to lay the framework. And now we're going to get into the juicy how-to, like how do you set boundaries? So I'm really excited to hear about what your side of the street has to say.
Sure. Thanks. So I guess when I think about the how-to pieces of boundary work, I immediately think about the clients that I work with. And most often, the boundary work that I do with clients are clients that have been abused, neglected, or traumatized in some way. And as a result of those traumatic experiences, their boundaries have become more rigid, less flexible, and as a result of that, it's much more challenging for them to know what they need and what they want from other people because they're not willing to engage with other people in terms of what they need and what they want. And so the work that I do with people around that really centers on internal family systems theory.
Yes.
And so for people who are not familiar with IFS, or internal family systems theory. That's a psychological theory that asserts that within all human beings, we have what's called parts. And these parts are these distinct pieces of our personality that have different motivations and desires and wants. And so when I'm working with people around boundaries, one of the things that I am working with them on are their yes parts and their no parts. And there are usually 4 different parts in that framework. So there is the part of the person that does or doesn't say yes to themselves, that does or doesn't say yes to other people. Then there are the 2 other parts, which are the parts of them that say no to themselves or no to other people. And so part of that parts work is to really understand how is yes and no functioning, and how does the yes and no parts to the person, how are those conversations, those internal dialogues between when I'm going to say yes to myself, when I'm going to say yes to other people, no to myself, no to other people, how is that helping me and how is that hurting me? And so I always think that boundary work always starts with identifying your yes parts and your no parts and how are they dialoguing or not dialoguing with each other.
Yes, that's a great overview. And I love the parts work too. And I know Walt Whitman, in his poems, said, we contain multitudes. And I love that idea. And I use the parts work also, IFS, for a lot of the work I do with people that have eating disorders, the overeaters. The part that wants to be slim, there's a part that wants to binge, and there's a part, and the conflict there. And saying no to the part, saying no to the cupcake is saying yes to being lean and serene, fit and fabulous. But I love that idea of having, there are more than probably 4 maybe. There's a lot of different yeses and nos in there. And the conflicts we have when somebody wants to take you on a date, let's say, and you want to say yes, but you say no because you're afraid. So it gets complicated,
Mm-hmm.
and every no is a boundary, as you said in the earlier podcast. I think boundaries comes down to 10,000 no's. Many ways to say no, no, thank you, and no, I don't want that, or yes, I want this, or I'm asking for something. So boundaries go both ways. What do we allow in, and what are we saying, blocking? I don't want this. I don't like this. I want to change things.
Yeah.
So the question remains. I think it's also tied up with values. That you have to find out what your values are and stick with them. And like they become your true north. So when you want a certain kind of situation in a relationship and somebody crosses a line and does something inappropriate, you go, this is like not acceptable, and it's not part of my value system. And it's a lot of work finding out values.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of the how-to piece of this is really about building the different layers of awareness around your boundaries. Again, as we said in the first episode, there are lots of different forces and factors that contribute to how our boundaries get established. Everything from, historical norms, cultural norms, family norms, all of that stuff gets internalized by us. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes all of those forces just become our boundaries, and we just start playing those boundaries out without kind of critically looking at them and examining them. So I think all boundary work starts with some form of awareness building work. And I think the other thing that you said that's really important as it relates to this yes or no is the order of operations, which is to say, do you typically say no to yourself first so that you will say yes to other people? Mm. And I often will encourage my clients to think about, what if you flip the script? What if you said no to other people first, or said yes to yourself first? Because too often, many of our clients are the last thing on their priority list. Mm-hmm. And if you always start with yourself as the priority in your life, then that's going to create some inherent boundaries, because you're not going to have as much time to devote to saying yes to other people. Every time you say yes to somebody else, you are saying no to yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And I also want to, again, just say that without any judgment or having any shame about it, I consider myself a recovering people pleaser too. I have to say, when I was in my plus sizes, that weight that I maintain, that large weight loss, is like 130 pounds of unexpressed grief and rage, and the people-pleasing from saying yes when I meant no, saying yes way too much, and then I was eating stuffing the anger down, and I had to learn as part of my recovery process to say no. No, I'm not doing this. No, I don't want that. And even with my husband, may he rest in peace. No, I don't want pizza for dinner tonight. No, you can order it. I'm not going to have that. You're on your own there. Saying no. And, saying no to pizza. And there's nothing wrong with pizza, but what he got, like the meat lovers pizza, was like, I didn't want to get that, and I wanted, whatever. Saying no is saying yes to being lean and serene, fit and fabulous, having energy, being able to run up mountains, So learning to say no, saying yes to myself and saying no to these people, or demands on my time, people, calling inappropriate times of day, whatever. So anyway, people pleasing is an issue. Oprah calls it the disease to please. We have to look at that, first of all, with gentleness, no judgment. I'll tell myself, darling girl, let's not do that again. I've learned with people pleasing, you can't beat yourself up. You have to learn to just move forward. You recover from that slowly. It doesn't happen in one day, one podcast, one conversation. Sure. This is an ongoing work. Yeah. And now, I know I'm like 90% better, like 95% better maybe even, but there are times when I do things when I say yes, when I should have said no, and then I'll just have to laugh at myself or try to regroup, and also for people who are recovering people pleasers, we need to learn to become bulletproof to other people's disapproval. If you're someone who used to always say yes to things and then now you're saying no, people aren't going to like it, and tough, again, borrowing from Mel Robbins, let them be angry, let them be annoyed, let them have a tantrum. Tough, Yeah, and that's a boundary for me. That's a big boundary for me.
Yeah, and the truth is if people are pissed off at you because you've set a boundary, it probably means that you were being taken advantage of, which is to say they were getting more out of the relationship with you than you were getting out of it with them.
Yes.
And so I do think it's important that how people respond to your boundaries is in many ways a good appraisal of just how healthy that relationship was. People that really love you and care about you will respect your boundaries. People who don't really care about your boundaries are going to hem and haw and pitch a fit. And so really pay attention to how people respond. The issue isn't your boundaries. The issue may be about them and what they were getting out of the relationship from you. So I think that's an important piece to say.
Yeah.
I also think for those folks who may not be quite ready to whip out the nuclear no, I think there is a way. I think there's a way to assert your needs without using the word no at all, which is to say something like, so just say, for example, somebody wants you to do something for them. You can say something like, thank you so much for thinking of me. It really means a lot that you would ask me to do this thing for you.
I like that. I'd rather not.
Unfortunately, I can't do that. Check back with me in a month and maybe some time will have freed up for me.
That's really good. Yeah.
And so I think that especially for
the nuclear no.
For our no-phobes, there is still a way to very diplomatically let people know, that no, you can't do something, but you really appreciate that they thought of you. And all you just have to do is, I don't have time to do that. And you're also saying, check back with me later, because maybe I will be free and maybe I'll want to do it in a month.
Absolutely. Asking. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I go to a Sunday morning yoga class at 8:30, and there's several people in there who I like. We're very acquaintance friends, and we often say we should go to lunch, we should go for a hike or something. And last 2 weeks ago, my friend said, do you want to go? My husband and I are going for breakfast over at Dragonfly. Do you want to join us? And I said, let me think about it. Now, even though I like these people, but I was like, I had a day planned and I wasn't planning to go to breakfast, and so I said, let me think about it. Walking from the yoga studio to the car, I said, I'll text you from the car if I'm going to meet you there. I'm not quite sure if I can do it. I'm thinking about it, which for me was such progress because I normally just say yes,
Right.
So I walked from the yoga to the car. By the time I got to the car, I thought, I really would like to have breakfast with them. It'd be nice. So I texted, I'll see you at Dragonfly. Right. For me, that was a big. The boundary for me would be like just if I said yes and then I was second guessing myself. Yeah. So it's a small thing, but it was a big thing.
Yeah.
And I had a lovely time with them there.
Yeah. And I also think it's, as you're saying that, that's making me think about work. And again, I think work boundaries can be a
Huge.
Particularly challenging piece because we talked about in the first episode, there can be this power dynamic where your boss is asking you to do something, or a colleague who's more senior than you is asking you to do something.
Yes.
And, again, I am not prescribing this to other people. I'm just describing it in terms of how I manage my own work life. So, for 9 months out of the year, I'm working full-time in higher ed. And so for 9 months, I say yes to just about everything. And then when it's summertime and I'm off contract, I say no to everything. Like, you can't get a hold of me in the summer at all.
Awesome.
And again, that is how I am managing my boundaries. And it feels fine to do that for me.
It's healthy, Heath. It's healthy.
Well, and again, it's about balancing my professional ambitions, because if I say no to the dean or the provost or to the department chair, like, I risk not having their support when it's time for promotion and tenure. So during the academic year, I will say yes.
You're available.
I say yes as much as I can, so that in the rare times when I say no, it doesn't feel like such a big deal, because I've built this reservoir of yeses that I've been saying for the last 9 months, right?
Well, and you're talking about time boundaries too. Yeah. And I want to say that the people who know me in my personal life, it's not rigid, but I often take like a digital Sabbath on Saturday. I'm not religious about it, but like basically from like Friday night until Sunday night or Monday morning, I don't look at email.
Yeah.
I don't and I do have my phone with me, and of course things pop up and I'll notice, but I'll generally, like, unless something's time sensitive, like if you sent me an email saying urgent, I would see it and I'd open it. Right. But otherwise, I don't look in there. I don't get involved. The text, I glance at them, but I don't get involved, and it's a digital Sabbath for me, and I love to feel unplugged. It's a relief, really. And I'm hiking, I'm out in the world, I'm doing stuff, and then on Sunday night or Monday morning, I take a look and I see what's going on, and sometimes people get annoyed. Well, until they know me, they go, "Why? I sent you a thing on Saturday. Why didn't you respond?" I said, "Well, I don't do that." So it's also nice. I've heard good things about it clinically, taking a break off camera, being off computers and screens. Anyway, that's another boundary that I think is very important.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about people in one's life who constantly transgress boundaries, like people who we've set limits with, we've said no to, and they just continuously like bore through the boundary and continue ahead anyways? Right. How do you think we should handle that?
So that's a very important question. And again, there's two things I'm going to mention. I want to talk about Judith Orloff's work, because this relates, her positive energy book on energy vampires. That's an energy vampire tactic, what they're doing there. Yeah. And also the voice. So let's say if it's family, if it's husband, children, family, cousins, whatever, and they're violating, I'm going to probably have some love for them. So it's very important before I speak to them to get in touch with the love. And I will pause. And what does pause stand for? There's an acronym. I might make this up. Pause is pray and utilize spiritual energy. And if you're not religious, if you're not spiritual, you can just think of it as the universe, whatever. The universe is giving you energy to calm. And then I want to feel the love for the person. I'm going to see that person in my mind and feel the love for them. So then when I speak to them, my voice is going to sound like silk and velvet, and they're going to hear me. And I'm going to say things that are very effective, like, when you do X, I feel Y, and I request Z. So, for instance, when you call me at 1 o'clock in the morning, it frightens me. I get scared. I'm anxious. It upsets me. I request you don't call after 10 o'clock unless it's urgent. If it's one of those things. Mm-hmm. So the formula is, when you do X, I feel Y, I request Z, in a very silky, soft voice, and then they can hear it. And that's how I would approach a violator, someone who's transgressing, who's in my life, who's a close person. Mm-hmm. I would, and for people who are in my work life, I would do a similar thing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to feel the same love I feel for my family, but I would feel kindness for them and compassion, And the voice modulation is very important, because it's not what we say, but how we say it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Setting that boundary.
Yeah. This is where you and I might disagree a little bit, and I think that's actually a very good thing. First of all, I support everything that you said in terms of the approach. I do think in some rare instances where you've done the silky voice, you've modulated, you've made the request, and they're still steamrolling. I do think that an option that I will admit to that I have used in my own life. There are some family members I have just severed connections with.
The blocking.
I will not. I won't engage with them. Period.
Well, that's the healthiest if you have to do it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But again, letting people know that that's going to happen, letting them know that you have tried over and over and over to get them to understand the boundary violation. Yes. They have not seen and or heard or respecting. And now we're at a point where, in order for us to reconnect, there needs to be a pretty formal forgiveness process where there's a recognition of the transgression.
That's right. You need to hear it.
That they have understood the harm, that they, even if they don't agree, it's not about whether they agree or not, it is about they understand that what they did or said crossed a line, it crossed my line, and I'm important enough. I'm more important than what they think about my boundary.
That's right.
And that here's the steps they are willing to take in order to rebuild.
That's beautiful.
Right. And if people are not willing to do that, then the block.
cut,
exactly.
snip, snip, snip. Estrangement is the last resort.
Yes, absolutely.
And also on our phones, you have the block feature. You can block some. I love the
That's
blocking.
true.
You can
Yeah.
block people. I
Yeah.
love blocking people. If I have to, I block.
Yeah.
I had some happen recently, but years ago when I was dating, sometimes you have to block people.
Yeah,
just don't
exactly.
who don't stop contacting
Yeah.
you. But I want to share also.
Please.
There's a gal. I love sharing resources and my mentors here. So Judith Orloff. She was a Boston girl. She went to Harvard Medical School, psychiatrist. Now she's in California. And in her book, Positive Energy, this is from 2004, it's her first book. She spun off a bunch of other books that are just very redundant, frankly. This is the best one, I think, 2004. In Chapter 9, she has a section called The Ninth Prescription, Protect Yourself from Energy Vampires. And in this book, she came out of her spiritual closet with this, just how you can be in a good mood and feeling really relaxed and peaceful, and somebody comes into a room and all of a sudden you're exhausted and you're very uncomfortable. You go, what is going on here? And she's identified how people can suck our energy. And there's many techniques that have been theorized about this, and she has her versions are pretty interesting. But the idea is that nobody gets up in the morning and goes, I'm going to suck the energy out of Heath. I'm going to go in there and take all his. Nobody even thinks, they don't even know they're doing it. They're completely unconscious beings. But what we need to do is to up our game, is to be aware that people suck our energy. And I'm not going to we don't have time to get into details right now, but basically, there's many techniques you can use, including surrounding yourself with this like egg of light, or asking Archangel Michael to come and protect you with his wings. There's a whole bunch of protective visualizations, basically, half a dozen of them, that I love, because you pick one that feels comfortable. You try them all, you pick one, and they work. Like, I can go to a room with like so-and-so, uncle so-and-so who annoys me, and I don't like, and he's a troublesome character. Right. And I put that energy around me, and I am safe. And I do this before I go to the party, and then I'm like, bulletproof, and no matter what shenanigans he does, doesn't affect me. Yeah. And my energy maintains intact. Now, these are skills you can learn. This is not like magic. You can learn this stuff, and we have to learn to be proactive. Like before you go to, even with business meetings at work, when you're at work and you have a certain boss who's very toxic or a colleague who you can't stand, you want to protect before you go into the meeting. Armor up, and then when you get in there, you are high functioning and unflappable. And to me, that's so worth it. I mean, and I've been using this for quite some time. And also, as a formerly plus size woman, this also keeps me in my size 10 clothes, because if I don't say it, I eat it. And if I don't protect myself with these mental processes, right, I react. I get very reactive. Yeah. And we want to be able to know that you can react better, and you don't have to go being at the mercy or be a victim of these people,
Yeah. And I like what you said there. And I think part of the other technique that people can use for preparation before engaging with people who may be chronic boundary violators is to practice in front of a mirror.
Yes.
Like stand in front of your bathroom mirror and kind of practice the conversation, practice the assertiveness,
Absolutely.
say the words out loud, embody.
Rehearsing.
Right, exactly. And see yourself do it. Like seeing is believing.
Yes.
And so if you can kind of see yourself in the mirror, setting the appropriate boundary with the loved one or the colleague or friend, you're much more likely to do it. Yeah. If you've seen it and you've heard yourself do it.
Well, you're building a muscle memory.
That's
it's like
right.
Psychological muscle memory.
That's right.
You're lifting mental kettlebells there, and you're wanting to be able to strengthen that part of you that says the affirmative decline or no. I like that you said, now I'm going to think of nuclear no, but I'd rather not do that. I'd rather not talk about that. Yeah. I'd rather not go there. It's a nicer way than saying no. But I'm just being,
Yeah.
But I like the idea of rehearsal. Absolutely. Yeah. And visualizing too. Visualizing the the inner game of conversation, so it goes your way.
Yeah. And if you're going to do the imagery work, I always recommend that you imagine the best case scenario and the worst case scenario.
Yes.
And then imagine how you're going to handle that, right? And kind of practice in the mirror. What happens if your boss or colleague goes nuclear and calls you out and yells and screams and does the thing that they're probably not going to do, but is your fear fantasy of what they are going to do. Simply by exposing yourself to the worst case scenario and rehearsing and preparing for how you're going to handle that is going to toughen you up. It's going to make you more like Teflon, so that whatever comes your way just slides right off.
Yeah. And there's another, I collect acronyms. Someday I'm going to have a book of acronyms. I've been saying I'm doing this for years, and people are still yelling at me, why haven't you done that book yet? But there's an acronym called Q-TIP. Have you heard of this? The Q-TIP, quit taking it personally.
Yeah.
So when we are with one of these obnoxious people, the ones you've estranged, or like the energy vampires, as it were, we have to remember they're not doing it to us. They're just doing it. This is how they roll in the world. This is who they are. And I happen to be in their face right now, so they're doing it to me. But it's not about me. Yeah. It is how they are. They're just obnoxious, And by practicing the Q-tip skill, you can really relax and go, let them just run the number. It's not about me. And not to personalize, which is a part of this,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're coming up with about one minute to go. And so
It goes so fast.
I know it does. But that also means we're probably having a pretty good conversation. So, so I'm wondering if there are any kind of important things that we've talked about in this episode that you kind of want to summarize and drive home.
Well, what comes to mind with boundaries is like the only way to do it wrong is to not do it at all. You got to give it a try. Dip your toe in the water and just start after this episode, start experimenting or start reading about it. There's a ton of books on this, and I have to say, that's what I would contribute. How about you?
Yeah. I would go back to understand your yeses and your nos. What are your yeses? Who do you say yes to first, yourself or other people?
Yes.
And really try to understand why that's true. Like, really think about why is it that other people are more important than you, that you say yes to other people more than you say yes to yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Heath. I love that.
Thank you.
We say yes to ourselves first. I love that.
Yeah.
So this has been Process Recordings. I'm Lisa Wessan.
And I'm Heath Hightower.
Thank you for joining us. It's an honor to talk with you and be with you on this segment. And remember, good health is wealth. Go for it. You deserve it.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Process Recordings is produced by Lisa Wessan and Heath Hightower, with technical support from Chelmsford TeleMedia, the community media center of Chelmsford, Massachusetts.